What separates the guys who always catch fish from the guys who always have an excuse? I watched a man at Lay Lake in Alabama last spring fish the same bank as four other people and outproduce all of them combined. Same weather, same fish. He wasn't using better gear. He was doing 10 things differently that nobody else noticed. Last September, I asked him what he'd tell someone who wanted to fish smarter instead of harder. He rattled off a list in about 2 minutes flat, and I wrote the whole thing on the back of a gas station receipt. Most of it I'd heard before in pieces, but never connected. Every trick he mentioned came back to the same principle. Smart anglers don't know more fish. They see more water. They pay attention to what's already in front of them. And the last thing he told me, keeping a fishing log, is the trick that turned his guessing into a pattern he could repeat. After one season of writing things down, he tripled his catch rate on his home water. Stay for that one. You've probably done this 1,000 times. Pulled up to a spot, grabbed whatever rod was closest, and just started casting toward the middle of the water. Maybe you picked that spot because it looked good from the road. Maybe someone told you it fishes well. But you didn't read the water first, and that means every cast for the next hour is a guess. Reading water is the single most important thing you can do before your bait touches the surface. Look for current seams, those lines where moving water meets still water. They look like a visible crease on the surface, sometimes barely wider than a shoelace. Bait fish collect along those seams because the slower water lets them rest while food drifts past in the current. Predators know this. They sit just inside the slow side and pick off anything that drifts too close. Look for color changes. A patch of darker water next to lighter water usually means a depth change, a submerged ledge, or a channel. Fish relate to those transitions the way deer relate to field edges. They feel safe near the change because they can move between depth zones quickly. Foam lines on the surface tell you where current is pushing debris and insects into a concentrated lane. That lane is a feeding conveyor belt. If you see a foam line running parallel to the bank, cast along it, not across it. Wind matters too. A steady breeze pushes plankton and bait fish toward the windward shore, and the predators follow. If you show up and the wind is blowing into a point or a bank, start there. The food chain is already stacking in your favor. I spent a full morning at Lake Blackshear in South Georgia doing nothing but watching the surface before I made a single cast. Took notes on where the seams were, where the color shifted, where foam collected along the dam face. When I finally started fishing, I put my first cast on a current seam about 30 feet off a concrete spillway. Bass were stacked on it. 11 fish in 90 minutes. All from water I could have walked past if I hadn't been looking. Most of the guys around me were fan casting open water and catching nothing. The only time reading water gets unreliable is on perfectly still, windless days when the surface gives you almost nothing to work with. No seams, no foam, no color shifts. On those days, you're back to structure and electronics. But anytime there's current, wind, or flow, the water is telling you where the fish are. You just have to look before you throw. Once you've identified where the fish are holding, most guys make the same mistake. They cast straight out from the bank, perpendicular to the shoreline. The bait lands in the strike zone, crosses through it for about 2 seconds, and then it's in open water where nothing is feeding. That's maybe 2 feet of productive water out of a 40-foot cast. Cast parallel to the bank instead. Your bait stays in the productive zone for the entire retrieve. If fish are holding along a weed line or a drop-off that runs along the shore, a parallel cast keeps your bait in front of them for 30 or 40 feet instead of 2. I started doing this on Possum Kingdom Lake in North Texas, and my hookup rate roughly doubled over a weekend. Same spots I'd fished before. The only change was the angle of my cast. This applies from a boat or from the bank. If you're standing on shore, walk 20 yards down the bank and cast back along the edge you just walked past. It feels counterintuitive because you're casting toward where you were standing, but that angle keeps the bait tight to the bank for the full retrieve. From a boat, position yourself so you're casting along the structure line, not across it. You want the lure tracking with the drop-off, not cutting through it like a shortcut. Gamakatsu makes what I consider the best hooks in the price range for most freshwater applications. But whatever brand you use, drop down one size from what the package recommends. If the packaging says use a 2/0 for that soft plastic, try a 1/0. The smaller hook has a narrower gap, which means the point doesn't have to travel as far to penetrate. You get a faster, deeper hook set on the same strike. Most short strikes and missed fish come from a hook that's slightly too big for the bait, not too small. I switched down one size across all my soft plastic setups last year and my hookup percentage went up noticeably. The fish don't care about hook size. They care about whether the point sticks. This next one changed more about how I fish than any single piece of gear I've ever bought. Match your retrieve speed to the water temperature, not roughly, precisely. In water below 55 degrees, fish are sluggish. Their metabolism is slow. They won't chase anything moving fast because the caloric cost of the chase isn't worth the meal. Real slow. Actually slower than that. I'm talking about one full crank of the handle every 3 to 4 seconds. It feels painfully slow when you're doing it. It works. Above 70 degrees, the opposite. Fish are aggressive and competitive. A faster retrieve triggers a chase response because the fish thinks the bait is escaping and it has the energy to run it down. Between 55 and 70 is the transition zone where you have to experiment. But the general rule holds. Colder water means slower hands. I tracked this across 40 trips on Lake of the Pines in East Texas over 2 seasons. In water below 55, a slow retrieve produced 62% of my total bites. In the same water with a moderate retrieve, I got 23%. Same lures, same spots, different speed. The fish were telling me what they wanted. I just had to slow down enough to listen. The mistake most guys make is retrieving at whatever speed feels comfortable to their hands, which is usually too fast. Your natural reel speed is about twice what a cold water fish wants to see. Force yourself to go slower than feels right. Count it out if you have to. 1 Mississippi between each crank. It feels like doing nothing, but that's when you feel the thump. A cheap waterproof thermometer changes this from guesswork to a system. Stick it in the water when you arrive, check the reading, and adjust your speed before your first cast. You'll know within 5 degrees what the fish want before you've even started. Picture a fallen tree lying in the water with the trunk half submerged. One side faces the sun, the other side sits in shadow. Where do you cast? Most guys throw to the sunny side because they can see the structure better. Smart anglers throw to the shade. I've gotten into arguments about this at boat ramps, and I know some guys swear the sunny side holds more fish because the warmth attracts bait fish. In my experience, the shadow side wins about 7 out of 10 times on a bright day. I can't tell you exactly why with certainty. It might be that bass prefer the ambush advantage of sitting in dark water while prey moves through the lit area. It might be a comfort thing, less light on the eyes, cooler temperatures in summer. Or it might be simpler than that. A fish in shadow can see into the light, but a fish in light can't see into the shadow. Predators like to see their food before they commit. A buddy of mine fished the shady side of laydowns on Lake Blackshear for an entire weekend while I deliberately fished the sunny side of the same trees. Same baits, same retrieve speeds, same everything except which side of the trunk we cast to. He pulled 19 keeper bass. I got 8. Same trees, different sides. That's the kind of result that ends an argument. This is what I mean by seeing what's already in front of you. The shade was always there. The fish were always on that side. Nobody bothered to check. On cloudy days, this advantage disappears because there's no meaningful shadow. But any day with direct sun, put your bait in the shade first. Always. If you're enjoying this so far, subscribe. We've got more of these coming. You might have already heard this one, but almost nobody actually does it. Use the lightest sinker that still gets your bait to the bottom. Most guys grab a 3/8 ounce weight out of habit because that's what was on last time. In 6 feet of calm water, that's probably double what you need. A heavy weight plunges unnaturally fast and makes a thud on the bottom that spooks wary fish. A lighter weight, maybe a 1/8 ounce, about the size of a shirt button, falls slower and settles quietly. It looks more like real food drifting down. The lighter fall also gives fish more time to react and strike on the way down, which is when a lot of bites happen that guys with heavy weights never feel. Try going one size lighter than your instinct says and see what happens. In heavy current or deep water, you'll need to go heavier to maintain bottom contact. But in calm, shallow water where most bank fishing happens, lighter is almost always better. When you feel a fish hit and you set the hook, which direction do you pull? If you're yanking the rod straight up toward the sky, you're pulling the hook toward the roof of the fish's mouth, which is hard, bony plate. Bad angle. The hook point skates across bone instead of digging in. Sweep the rod sideways instead. A hard horizontal sweep, like you're trying to close a car door with the rod tip, drives the hook into the corner of the mouth where the tissue is softer and the hook can penetrate and hold. This is especially true with single hook lures like jigs and soft plastics. I switched to a sideways hook set about 3 years ago after watching a tournament angler at a clinic demonstrate why straight-up sets fail. My hook-to-land ratio went from maybe 50% to closer to 75% on soft plastics. That's not a small change when you're only getting 8 or 10 bites in a morning. The one exception is treble hooks on crankbaits and topwater, where a straight-up set can work because the multiple hook points find purchase regardless of angle. But for anything with a single hook, sweep sideways. Every time. And keep your rod tip low during the fight afterward. A high rod tip gives you zero shock absorption when the fish surges. Tip at about 10 o'clock, reel steady, and let the drag do its job. I've lost more fish to frayed line than to any other single cause, and it took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out why. Your knot weakens with every cast. Friction through the guides, contact with rocks, abrasion from a fish fight, even just the sun beating down on monofilament degrades it over a few hours. After about 30 minutes of active casting, retie. Cut off the last 12 inches and tie fresh. It takes 30 seconds, and it prevents the one failure you can't fix once it happens. The fish that breaks you off is always the biggest one. Always. Run your fingers along the last foot of line before you retie. If you feel any roughness, any flat spots, any nicks, you just saved yourself from losing the best fish of the day. You've been fishing the same spot for an hour. Same cast, same retrieve, same angle, and nothing's biting. Before you move to a different spot entirely, try this. Think of the water in front of you as a clock face. Your first cast went to 12 o'clock, straight out. Cast the next one to 1 o'clock, then 2, then 3. Work your way around the dial until you've covered every angle between 9 and 3. Most fish aren't positioned directly in front of you. They're holding at an angle to the structure or the current break, and a straight cast misses them entirely. A base sitting tight to a stump at your 2 o'clock never sees a bait that lands at 12. Fan casting covers water you didn't know you were ignoring. I picked this up from a guide on a crappie trip who wouldn't let me make the same cast twice. Every time I'd drift back to my favorite angle, he'd tap my shoulder and say, "Move the clock." Drove me crazy for the first hour. By the end of the day, I'd caught fish at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock that I never would have found casting straight out. The key is being deliberate about it. Don't just throw randomly in vaguely different directions. Work the clock in order. 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3. Give each angle 2 or 3 casts with a slightly different retrieve. If a fish hits at 1 o'clock, make 5 more casts to that same angle before moving on because there's probably another one nearby. This works for everything: bank fishing, boat fishing, kayak fishing, bass, crappie, walleye, trout. Anytime the bite goes quiet, move the clock before you move the truck. Remember those 9 tricks I just walked through? Reading water, casting angles, hook sizes, retrieve speed, shade positioning, weight selection, hook sets, knot management, fan casting. Every one of them helps. But here's what the guy at Lay Lake told me that tied it all together. Keep a fishing log. Not on your phone. In a small waterproof notebook you keep in your tackle bag. Write down 5 things after every trip. Date, water temperature, weather conditions, what you caught, and what you caught it on. That's it. 5 lines. Takes about 90 seconds while you're loading the truck. After 1 season of doing this, something happens that your memory alone can't produce. Patterns emerge. You start noticing that every time the water temperature hit 63 degrees, you caught fish on a slow retrieve jig near shade structure. Or that after a 2-day rain, the fish moved to current seams and ignored everything except a Yozuri crankbait in crawfish pattern. Or that the 3rd week of October on your home lake, bass move to points every single year. You can't hold that kind of data in your head across 50 trips, but on paper, it jumps off the page. I started my log 3 years ago on Lay Lake. That first season, I averaged about 4 fish per trip, which is about where I'd been for years. By the 2nd season, working from patterns in the notebook, I averaged 11. Same lake, same gear, same skill level. The only difference was that I stopped guessing where to fish and started going where the data told me the fish had been before under the same conditions. The trick that made the biggest difference was cross-referencing water temperature with bait type. I noticed that below 58 degrees, a mustad jig head with a green pumpkin trailer outperformed everything else by a wide margin. Above 65, a shallow crankbait in shad pattern dominated. Between 58 and 65 was a toss-up. That kind of insight doesn't come from instinct or memory. It comes from writing things down and being honest about what worked and what didn't. Most guys say they'll remember. They don't. 3 trips later, the details blur together and you're back to guessing. The notebook keeps you honest. It also keeps you from repeating mistakes. Because when you flip back through the pages and see fished sunny side, caught nothing, switched to shade, caught 5, written 3 different times, you stop making that mistake permanently. It doesn't look like much. It's a $4 write in the rain pad with terrible handwriting and coffee stains on half the pages. But it's the most valuable thing in my truck on any given Saturday morning. Every trick on this list was sitting right in front of you. Reading water, casting smarter, adjusting your speed, paying attention to shade and weight and angles. None of it requires new gear or more money. Just a little more attention and a $4 notebook that costs less than a bag of soft plastics. The guys who catch fish every time out aren't lucky. They're just writing things down and paying attention to what the water's been trying to tell them all along. Next time you're at the lake, spend 10 minutes watching before you cast. The fish will still be there, and now you'll know where they're sitting.